The world of Sonic the Hedgehog has been thrust into a not-so-dark, not-so-stormy hard-boiled detective story that probably nobody saw coming. Follow Sonic and the intrepid Chaotix Detective Agency as they take on their biggest case yet. This high-flying, action-packed adventure will take them across the world, fighting for every clue they can find. It's one heck of a tale, which is good, because this story might be the only thing that can save their lives.
No. Well, if that's all, I can just dispose of you.
Wait, what?
All will be revealed in Sonic the Hedgehog presents The Chaotix Case Files. Listen now, wherever you get your podcasts.
When the Chaotix are on the case.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
This is True Crime Cast. Jamie and John back again. What's up?
Dude, it is the time to mow my yard.
I, on my way over here, was like, I can't believe he hasn't mowed his lawn yet. Like,
it will happen.
What a slacker.
It's
for
happening.
Real.
It's still like really wet because we've had so much rain and snow and ice.
Wow.
I just need...
Sounds like it's just raining excuses outside.
No. Do you really think I would have an excuse as to why I haven't mowed my yard?
I assume you would have mowed mine already too. So all good.
Yours
we'll
needs
get
it
there.
more than mine right now.
Wow.
You have a lot of
Judgy.
those little onion shoots coming
Judgy,
up. I
yeah.
am judging.
Well, it's not a crime. And we've got a good crime today. We've got a good story. Hoping to get some resolution to this one. A couple months ago, we did an alleged wrongful conviction, and we decided to try to do more of those. So we'll go through today's and see what people think.
Yep. While we have that to look forward to, I do want to say that we have a couple of new Patreon members I'd like to thank. So first we have Dosha. I hope I said your name correctly. And then we also have Kristen. So Dosha, Kristen, thank you all so much for joining Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you can get early content that is ad-free. But most importantly, you get a brand new exclusive episode every month. And those are always really good. We have almost 8 years worth of those. So for $3 1 month, you can listen to as many of those as your little heart desires.
Yeah, we occasionally put some random stuff over there as well. Some embarrassing photos of us or some weird outtakes.
Man, we recently tried to record an episode of True Crime to Go. I had written it up. I was ready to go. It was going to be one of the most vulgar things we would have ever spoken about. Yeah. I made it 3 minutes in, and a line that I had written myself made me lose it. We didn't finish. We stopped, and you can listen to that brief 3-minute recording that is only available to Patreon members. We will never, ever release that anywhere.
No.
I didn't know you were releasing it. I wish you wouldn't have, but it's there.
We're not
taking it down.
I didn't want to do the case, but I did want to do today's case.
Yes.
So why don't you get us rolling?
So we are going to do a story today about a man named Lester Young. Lester was 34 years old. He worked as a handyman at his church in East Oakland. He was shot multiple times in his own home on the evening of September 21st, 2012. His 13-year-old nephew was in the room when it happened. Lester Young is the reason we're here today. Of course, we're going to get into his full story and who murdered him. Years after his death is when the justice system spent its energy on one that was not, I don't know that they really tried to find who actually killed him. The justice system instead spent its energy building a case against a man who may have had absolutely nothing to do with this murder. A man who would spend over a decade in prison and whose conviction has now been thrown out. So, Jamie, what is going on here?
Yeah, I love stories like this where we get some friction in the justice system and we're trying to find truth. What I don't like about these cases sometimes is that if there's a wrongful conviction and an exoneration, all of the attention goes to that person, and they deserve that attention. They have been wrongfully treated by the justice system, put in prison for something they didn't do. But I don't want to lose the focus on the original victim. So we're going to spend some time there, and we're going to talk about Lester Young himself. He was born in 1978, and he was raised in Oakland, of course, in California. By 2012, he was living in the 1800 block of Commerce Way in East Oakland, near San Antonio Park. Like John said, he worked as a handyman. He was a quiet, steady kind of a worker that you could always count on him. And this is the type of work he wanted to do. He wanted to show up, work hard, and go home. His mom, Deborah Young, would describe him as somebody that she loved deeply. She said she had no idea why any of this would happen to him or why anybody would target him in this way. She was upset that she would never be able to tell Lester happy birthday or Merry Christmas again, and I think that's one of the biggest fears of anybody that is a parent. In the same breath, she also said because of her religion, she had decided to forgive the person that did this, which I think is a strength that I don't know that I could come up with. And it's very admirable of her to do that and to speak that out publicly. We don't know everything about Lester. He's not somebody who is super active on social media, not somebody who had a long criminal record we could dive into, but we know he was a family man who was loved and worked hard, and his story was cut short at just 34 years old. But the story of what happened after his death, how the system that's supposed to seek justice for him failed him, and it also failed a man named Stephen Buggs that we'll talk more about here in a little bit. And the story, unfortunately, is not completely over yet. But John, take us back to 2012 and what happened to Lester that night.
Yeah, so the evening of September 21st, 2012 began like any other. Lester was at home. His 13-year-old nephew, Shaka, was home with him. At approximately 6:45 p.m., a man entered the home and shot Lester multiple times. Lester Young was pronounced dead at the scene. And like I said before, his nephew was the only other person in the room. He was the only witness to see what happened. Oakland Police Department responded and began their investigation, and speculation at the time suggested the shooting may have involved a dispute over a woman. The theory was that someone believed Lester had an affair with their girlfriend while he was in prison. But that motive was never firmly established. There was no motive that was definitively proven. What happened next would come to define the case, not the facts of the crime, but the investigation that followed.
A lot of these cases, we're going to have three main characters, right? We're going to have the victim, the person who is accused, and then hopefully at the end, we're going to have the real killer. There's a fourth character in this case that is probably, we'll say, the second biggest villain of all. And unfortunately, that was a homicide detective. He was assigned to the case, and his name was Phong Tran. At the time, Tran had been in the Oakland Police Department's homicide unit for about a year. He had a reputation as somebody with a high closure rate of his cases. In Oakland, where the homicide clearance rate was historically one of the lowest in the country, him having a high clearance rate really mattered, and it made him look good. His early work on this case produced what seemed like a pretty clear lead. Like you said, John, the only other person in the house was his nephew, Shaka Fagans Jr., and he saw everything that happened, and he identified somebody specific as the shooter.
I mean, isn't that all the evidence you need? I mean, I know that you don't like eyewitness testimony, but this kid is old enough, probably close enough to see the guy really, really well, assuming the guy wasn't completely covered in head to toe. But if you had a lineup of guys, I would trust this kid to point out the perp, right?
Right. Eyewitness testimony is not great, but this is a person old enough to know, you're right, and if they can identify somebody, that at least should point you in that direction. And at first it did. Tran obtained an arrest warrant for the person that was identified by Fagans. But before they brought this guy in, and we don't have his name, we don't know who Fagan said did this at this point. Before they even brought him in, something changed. Tran got a tip. We don't know if this came from an anonymous caller, a confidential informant, but Tran got a call that said that a man named Stephen Buggs was having problems with Lester Young. At this point, according to all reports, Tran completely shifted his focus from the person identified by the only witnesses of the scene to this confidential or anonymous tip. He set aside that original arrest warrant and he turned his investigation fully towards Stephen Buggs.
So he's ignoring the guy that was identified by the only living person alive in that room to go after this guy who had problems.
Yeah, and
I get it. I mean, I know that you have to uncover every stone, but I don't think you lose. I don't think you stop pursuing an identified perp. Simultaneously, you have to do everything else too. But I don't think you stop one thing to do another.
Yeah, and I don't see the need to. At this point, he had that name. He had an arrest warrant, and we know that he got the warrant because that's a legal document. But this person, as far as we know, was never actually arrested as part of this case. So he ignored that path, which you're right, as an investigator, you have to pursue every lead, and sometimes that's a dozen simultaneously. But he went all in on Buggs.
I think it was our friend Gary that's been on several times that said that his approach as a detective was to prove the person's innocence. And I mean, I like that approach. I believe that once you try to do that, you don't get the tunnel vision associated with trying to prove your case. And I wish that that theory or that premise would have involved both of these men here.
Yeah, we'll get more into Tran's reputation and some things that he did toward the end here. But for now, he's focused on Stephen Buggs, who's a truck driver from Oakland. He was 37 years old at the time of Lester Young's death. He and Lester had known each other since childhood. They had actually grown up together. So there was some familiarity between the two, and that's kind of all he had to go on.
So October 2012, about a month after the murder, Buggs was actually brought in for questioning, and he arrived at the police station, but he had to wait. He had to wait 15 hours before a recorded interrogation began. I hate going to the doctor and sitting there for like 30 minutes waiting for my appointment. So to be there for 15 hours, that's got to do something to you mentally, right?
Yeah, I think you're saying, like, yes, he waited 15 hours before somebody started questioning him in an interrogating way, but I think the interrogation started and lasted 15 hours before somebody said a word to him. It's almost like a form of torture.
Yeah. So what happened in that interrogation room would become a center of a legal firestorm years later. So according to court filings, Tran told Buggs, who is an African-American male, that he was a very scary guy when he stood up, meaning he's a big man and he's black and he's scary is basically what he meant by saying that.
It is. John, I feel like you're a very scary guy when you stand up, and I say that because you're big and broad-shouldered.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with your skin color, but he was very clear in what he meant by this when he said it to Buggs.
Yeah, and we know that because of the context around other statements that he made. Like, for instance, he warned this guy that the future jury could be what he referred to as the buttermen. This was a term that he used to represent white jurors who could, quote, sit there in their nice ascots, their polo shirts, their khaki pants, and look at Buggs in his red outfit and see a big dude who wouldn't cooperate with police, end quote. He allegedly also told Buggs that, quote, an all-white jury would see him as a big, black, scary guy, end quote. So this is not us speculating. These are court records that, you know, other context to what else was said to Buggs.
Not just according to Buggs, not allegedly. Like they know he said these things, and all of them are bad, but the combination is a lot.
Well, it gets worse. So also according to the filing, the detective told Buggs that by staying silent, By not confessing, he, quote, might as well squeeze that noose a little tighter, end quote. So not only is that just a racially very insensitive thing to say, it's a threat. If you don't confess, they're going to kill you.
And that's probably a common practice, because detectives can lie to you. They can threaten you all they want. They can say just about anything. Thankfully, there is going to be some accountability for what Tran said here, but it's not always the case.
I was having dinner with my family, and we were talking, just kind of being silly about, if you ever get pulled over, even if it's just for a speeding ticket, always demand an attorney. And I don't know how the conversation got there, but my son was like, well, nobody would ever admit to doing something wrong that they hadn't done. And I was like, oh boy, let me introduce you to the justice system. And I explained, cops are legally allowed to lie to you. So you may say something that you know you did not do, just as a way to get less punishment, because you think, oh, somebody has told them I did this and I did not do this, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life in prison. So 20 years sounds better than nothing.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Anyway, so Tran claimed that Bugs was a gang member. He also said that information that was later testified at trial was not true. So, but despite all of this, Bugs was arrested and charged with first-degree murder.
Keep in mind, the individual that was originally identified by the witness was just not pursued by this point. So
it's like they had the arrest warrant, but then that all went away when this guy found out Bugs was having some conflict with Lester.
Right. And we're going to take a break. When we get back, we'll talk about the trial, the appeals, and what we know now about what may have happened to Lester Young.
The world of Sonic the Hedgehog has been thrust into a not-so-dark, not-so-stormy hard-boiled detective story that probably nobody saw coming. Follow Sonic and the intrepid Chaotix Detective Agency as they take on their biggest case yet. This high-flying, action-packed adventure will take them across the world, fighting for every clue they can find. It's one heck of a tale, which is good, because this story might be the only thing that can save their lives.
Ah, well, if that's all, I can just dispose of you.
Wait, what?
All will be revealed in Sonic the Hedgehog presents The Chaotix Case Files. Listen now, wherever you get your podcasts.
When the chaotics are on the case.
The trial for Stephen Bugs started in early 2015. His attorney, Mark McGoldrick, argued from the start that his client had been misidentified. He told the jury that Bugs was innocent. The witnesses had simply gotten the wrong man. The defense pointed out that the only person actually in the room during the murder had identified somebody else. Prosecutors were never able to offer a firm motive to the jury. They never offered any physical evidence that tied Bugs to the scene. This case rested heavily on witness identifications and Tran's investigative work. The jury deliberated for about 2 days, so this was not an easy decision for them. But on February 9th of 2015, they found Stephen Bugs guilty of first-degree murder. They also found that he had discharged a firearm causing death, which is an enhancement or an aggravating charge that added 25 years to his sentence. Combined with prior convictions for attempted murder and being a felon in possession of a firearm, the judge sentenced Bugs to 82 years to life in state prison. Now, he's already in his 30s, late 30s. That's a life sentence. By the time that he was actually sentenced, he was closer to 40. So he was going to die in prison. And again, let me repeat. They never offered a motive. He and Lester Young had known each other since they were kids. They'd had their ups and downs, but no immediate, like, he owed him money. They had gotten in a fight, like none of that. And there was no evidence physically tying him to the scene. The one witness at the scene identified somebody else, but there were other witnesses that said, well, I heard he did this, or I saw him with this later, or I saw him heading that direction. Completely circumstantial. And again, circumstantial cases prove things all the time, but did they here?
I don't even know that I can call what happened here circumstantial. I think it is just a complete case of bias. So in a lot of ways, Tran was correct that the jury looked at him as a big, scary-looking black man because of his stature, and then also saw that he had prior convictions for attempted murder and also being a felon in possession of a firearm. That's what I think they based this whole conviction on.
Right. Yes. So
And,
his history and his looks.
There was no physical evidence presented. So, man, shame on them. I cannot imagine myself being on the jury and just hearing all of this information and being okay with it. I would hope I would not be. I've never been there.
Yeah, reasonable doubt's I don't know. I feel like that's got to be a very strong conviction of, yes, he had to have done this. And I don't see how you get there with what we have.
I've been called for jury duty, but I've never actually sat on a jury. Like I was a person who could be pulled from the pool of potential jurors. But I would hope that part of being a juror is a training on what that word means. What does it mean to have reasonable doubt? It's very, very important, and I hope that it's completely, unmistakably understood before someone sits on a jury.
I'm going to go ahead and assume it's not, just based on the fact that we're still doing this and we're having these conversations every week.
Gosh, man.
It's probably a quick sentence, sentences in, hey, this is what reasonable doubt means. Let's move on.
What a professional... We've talked about this before. Maybe we can discuss more at the end, but like at some point we're going to have like professional full-time jurors who have proven to be completely objective. Maybe AI.
Oh man, John has gone full in.
I don't know. I saw some people sitting around me in that pool of people that I would not want to be on a jury.
Yeah, I would not trust them to follow logic or really, I don't know, follow an argument, really.
And I think if you could find people to be on a professional jury pool, it may make the job of prosecutors and defense attorneys have to step it up a little bit. Because if you're going to have to prove to these people who definitely know what reasonable doubt is, you're going to have to present more to win your case.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Constitution says a jury of your peers, so I don't know. You could argue that that's not a peer situation since that's their profession. I think you could get into much more jury manipulation. I don't know. There are certainly problems with it, and I think we talked to the prosecutors about that, and we had them on, and they were both like, no, the system's set up the way it's supposed to be. It's like, well, if it is, why does it mess up so daggum always?
Yeah, maybe just do more training. Maybe that's a way to help out. Maybe they have to pass a test, and if they can't reasonably articulate what reasonable doubt is, you're not able to sit on the jury.
Give them case studies of, if I gave you this information, is there reasonable doubt? And if they can't get 9 out of 10 of those, then see ya, you're done.
I mean, I'm not trying to sound elitist, but a jury of my peers would know what that word means. So are they my peers if they don't?
That's
anyway, I'll move on. Lester Young's mother, Deborah, sat through this sentencing to see what was going to happen with her son, and she still didn't understand why it had happened. She was grieving her son and trying to make sense of a verdict that prosecutors told her represented justice. Stephen Buggs maintained his innocence the entire time. His attorneys maintained that it was a situation of misidentification, but the verdict was in, the case was closed. Tran, the investigator, moved on to other cases, and for years, that's where things would stand.
And the cracks in this case really started to come to the surface because of a completely separate case. In 2011, the year before Lester Young's murder, there was another murder. of a man named Marcus Butler, also in Oakland, and it was also investigated by Phong Tran. In this situation, two men, Giovante Douglas and Cartier Hunter, were convicted of this murder in 2016. So the murder happened before Lester Young, but the trial wrapped up after Stephen Buggs had been convicted. The key witness in this trial was a woman named Aisha Weber. She was, prosecutors said, an eyewitness, and she testified accordingly. Both men were convicted and sentenced to life in prison, much like Buggs. But in 2021, Aisha Weber recanted. In a sworn declaration, she said that she had received thousands of dollars from Detective Phong Tran to take the stand and say what he wanted her to say. He had taken advantage of the fact that she was homeless and desperate for money. When we do see misconduct from prosecutors and investigators, it's usually what we've talked about already of, you obviously had tunnel vision, you hid this evidence, you did that. Paying a witness to lie? Is there anything more egregious that we've seen than that, John?
My gosh, man. No, that is awful. I wonder where he came up with his money. I mean, investigators, detectives, they do well, but it's still like technically a state job. They're not able to give away thousands unless maybe his wife is just a doctor making it rain. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, I don't know where the money came from, but he gave it to Aisha, coached her, told her exactly what to say, and she would say in her recantation, she was not a real eyewitness. She had nothing to do with this. She had no knowledge of what actually happened. She had been paid to lie on the stand.
And she was paid well. This is more than a few $1,000s. She said at a 2023 preliminary hearing that she had received upwards of $30,000 from her arrangement with Tran. Come on. That's insane.
I mean, that's got to be coming from, where? Politicians? Is that coming from victims, advocates? Like, if he has that much money, he doesn't need to be lying to get ahead and win cases. And I don't know. What's his motive? We need to get to that, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, she said that she had an arrangement with Tran that she received $5,000 stuffed inside an envelope. When former Alameda County District Attorney Nancy O'Malley learned of Weber's recantation, she quietly moved to overturn the convictions of Douglas and Hunter. Both men ended up being released from prison. They had been incarcerated for years for a murder that they may not have committed. They subsequently filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Oakland Police Department, and that's when all the dominoes started to fall. In April of 2023, the new Alameda County District Attorney, Pamela Price, charged Phong Tran with multiple felony counts, including perjury and bribery of a witness. A warrant was issued for his arrest, and he was booked into the Santa Rita jail. He, of course, pled not guilty, and his attorney said there was no basis for the charges and that Tran was eagerly seeking to clear his name. The Oakland Police Department placed him on administrative leave, which is the right thing to do. He was probably still getting paid until, there was more evidence, I would imagine.
Yeah, when I hear people getting suspended from jobs, it seems like law enforcement gets suspended with pay the most. And I get that they're often accused of doing bad things by people who are just lying and totally get that. But here we have him behind bars, like being arrested for this serious charges. Two people have already been exonerated. So now all of Tran's work was under a microscope. The time was to go back through all of the court records from Alameda County and re-examine every case that Tran had been involved in. Because remember, he had this high clearance rate, and now we have somebody saying he paid me to lie. I mean, it's starting to add up that maybe he was just kind of cheating along the way. Obviously, Stephen Buggs' attorneys got involved when they found out what was happening. They argued that the same pattern of misconduct that contaminated the Douglas and Hunter case had happened in Buggs' case. They were happening at pretty much the same time. They pointed to the original eyewitness testimony from the nephew, who was the only person there, and that he had identified a specific person as, "I saw this person shoot my uncle." They argued that Tran had bypassed that identification and pivoted to Bugs based on an anonymous tip with obviously no physical evidence to support this and no reason really to not pursue the other avenue. They argued that Tran had lied in search warrant affidavits that he used to build the case, that interviews that Tran conducted either were never recorded or that the recordings were never preserved. So any conversations he was having with these witnesses about, well, I need you to say this, or trying to guide their statements and testimonies, we don't have the ability to know what really happened. They also argued that Tran's claim that Bugs was a gang member was completely unsupported, and that his own source, who he said, "This person told me that he was in a gang," denied this while he was under oath. They introduced the interrogation transcript that we talked about before, with the references to nooses, with the racial threats, with the big scary black guy comment, and that came up several times throughout this interrogation. His attorneys called in an expert in implicit racial bias, a law professor from the University of Hawaii, who concluded that Tran's investigation, and this is a quote, reflected significant influence from implicit racial bias, both in how investigators perceived him and in how they sought to elicit information, end quote. Implicit bias is implied bias. I think a lot of this is explicit, like he's showing direct bias publicly in his actions.
Yeah, especially when you listen to what he said to Bugs himself, his own words.
Wild.
In June 2025, that's when something extraordinary happened. An Alameda County prosecutor, not a defense prosecutor and not a defense attorney, but a prosecutor, filed a court document conceding numerous problems with the case. Deputy DA Tim Wagstaff acknowledged evidentiary issues that were central to the 2015 conviction. A sitting prosecutor was in effect acknowledging that the conviction of Stephen Bugs might be wrong. So Judge Thomas Stevens held an evidentiary hearing and based this on the Racial Justice Act claim. So in California in 2020, Racial Justice Act allows defendants to challenge convictions where racial bias may have impacted the outcome. So in December of 2025, Judge Stevens ruled, and he overturned Stephen Bugs' murder conviction. He found that the sheer accumulation of misconduct by Tran, all of which existed before the jury delivered its verdict in 2015, meant that he had no choice but to order a new trial. Stevens noted that he only needed to find that it was more likely than not that at least one juror would have changed their mind if they had known what was now known about Tran. So basically, Tran is now on trial in the minds of the jury. If they had known all of the stuff about him, would they have all voted or cast their lot for how they ended up doing it?
Or only one of them.
Yeah.
That's all he needed. And I think that is pretty easy to show here.
Well, he found that the threshold for that was met. And by December of 2025, Stephen Bugs had been behind bars for more than a decade for a crime that he may not have committed.
Upon the conviction being overturned, the new district attorney, Ursula Dixon, that's pretty powerful district attorney name, who had replaced Pamela Price, faced a decision. She had the choice of whether or not she wanted to retry Stephen Bugs or dismiss the case entirely. Earlier this year, January 23rd, 2026, in a hearing before the court, Assistant District Attorney John Broward announced the decision. The case against Stephen Bugs was dismissed in the interest of justice. Bugs was released from state prison. At this time, he was 50 years old. He had been incarcerated since 2012, first awaiting trial, and then serving a sentence. More than a decade of his life was gone. He had gone in as a truck driver in his late 30s and came out in his 50s. So a large chunk, like almost a quarter of his life, has been stolen from him because of Tran's misconduct and racial profiling. Now, Stephen Buggs is out. I assume there are going to be civil lawsuits and he's going to get some money. That does not give you the time back, but he deserves a settlement. Going back to the beginning, Lester Young's murder remains officially unsolved. The person that his nephew had identified at the scene, the original suspect who they had an arrest warrant for, was never charged. We still don't know conclusively and officially who killed Lester Young.
In the scheme of things, this is a relatively new case decision, but you want to see justice served as quickly as possible. This case now has to be reopened because the justice has not been served. This man's murder is still legally, it needs to be investigated. Arrests need to be made, and hopefully that happens swiftly. I would assume, and I guess that could get me in trouble, but you got to assume they're going to be looking back into the person that originally had an arrest warrant, and we'll see how that goes. I would hope that by the end of this year, we'll have some major case updates, hopefully with more attention, and this being released to media, all eyes are on to Oakland and Alameda County to see what happens with this case.
Yeah, but the guy that was originally identified, I mean, we never got a name. That was never public. He could be dead.
Yeah.
He could be unable to be found. And if there was any physical evidence to be found on him, obviously that's gone. So
none was presented in trial. So I don't know if there's anything that we would have from the crime scene that we could use DNA to compare to this unknown man. Who knows? We may never see justice for this young man, Lester, but I sure hope there is.
Stephen Buggs was at least the third person whose murder conviction has been undone because of Tran's alleged misconduct. The other two, Douglas and Hunter, they were wrongfully convicted in 2011. And as they continue to look over more than 200 homicide cases that Tran had a hand in, that review could potentially produce multiple case dismissals, lenient plea deals. In one case they've already looked at, a man was charged with killing his wife's boyfriend, and he received an 11-year sentence, a fraction of what he would have gotten because Tran's involvement had made a fair prosecution impossible. His criminal trial was set to start this week, but that didn't happen. The star witness in the case, Aisha Weber, we mentioned earlier, has disappeared. She said that she had received up to $30,000 to lie on the stand, but they can't find her. Prosecutor said she had apparently moved out of her apartment and was no longer answering calls. With her missing, the DA's office announced it was considering dropping all but one of the 4 charges against Tran, leaving only a single count of perjury. Days later, they changed their mind again, saying they got new information and intended to proceed with all the charges. So, I mean, this is all happening in real time. As of this recording, the trial's been delayed. It's kind of in legal limbo under California law. Under his right to a speedy trial, the case must go to trial by April 1st, 2026 to stay within that law unless they get some kind of extension. He continues to not deny all wrongdoing, but it seems pretty clear that there was a little bit more than no wrongdoing.
You could imagine the institutional fallout from this scandal, and there's some things I need to point out. So first off, 8 Oakland police officers, including 4 high-ranking staff members, signed off on allowing Tran to return to work while the bribery and perjury allegations were still active. That, for me, if I'm the police commissioner, if I'm the sergeant in charge, I don't want him working any cases. You got to think about, you make an arrest, but what happens after an arrest? Well, eventually a trial. So if you put this guy in the middle of an investigation while all this stuff is going on and he's not being cleared, you're going to face so much scrutiny during your trial that it would be best for him to be on administrative leave or working at a desk off the street.
Completely
you just cannot have him as an investigator. I'm saying that even if he is eventually proven to be innocent, you just can't have that.
Not worth the risk.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, so there's that. And then there's also the fact that the scandal has not helped Oakland's police department relationship with federal oversight. This is interesting. The department has been under a federal consent decree. This is a court-monitored reform process since 2003. So for 23 years, the federal government has been watching over the court system and the police department there in Oakland. And Tran scandal has been cited as one of the reasons the department has struggled to exit that oversight. I mean, this goes back 16 years at this point, just for Tran alone.
Right. Yeah, that's rough.
So an institution that can allow this to happen and then allow the man responsible to return to work is not an institution that has fixed what was obviously broken.
Yeah, there's a version of the story. Like we said, we spent a lot of time talking about Stephen Buggs, and that's legitimate. That's important. Hopefully he gets some kind of compensation for the horrible injustice done against him. More than 10 years in prison, separated from his family, losing his career, getting the reputation of being a killer. Profound injustice. But I don't want us to forget about Lester Young for even a minute, because in all of this, the overturned conviction, the legal wrangling, the detectives, criminal case, and alleged wrongdoing, Lester's name cannot get lost. He was shot multiple times in his own home in front of his 13-year-old nephew at just 34 years old. He was a quiet guy. He did have a criminal background, but that doesn't make you guilty of future things. That doesn't mean you deserve any type of violence or anything bad to happen to you. His mom said, no matter who it ends up being, she's going to forgive the person responsible for this. But she still doesn't know who that person is. Lester Young deserves real justice, and his family's still waiting for that.
Absolutely. Thankfully, Buggs is free. Tran is awaiting trial. Hopefully he will face, some consequences for what he's done, and the truth ultimately comes out in that. More than 200 cases are currently under review that were associated with Tran. And of course, we say it all the time, but Tran is innocent until proven guilty as well. So all of these are simply allegations. We're not declaring them to be true. We are just presenting you with the facts as we have them. These are all allegations. An unknown number of people may still be incarcerated for crimes they didn't commit, and convictions built on the same foundation, and that is the investigation by Trans and possible briberies that were taken by witnesses, quote unquote, who had nothing to do with the case. So that's where things stand right now. The truth is yet to come out for a lot of different things, and we will keep you posted on Trans official court dates, and if there are any further arrests for the murder of Lester Young.
Yeah, if these things about Tran are indeed true, and obviously I think they have to have some evidence that some of it's true to exonerate 3 people. So we'll see how much of it they're able to prove, if it's enough to hold him accountable criminally. But that's, so egregious. There are so many good police officers and good detectives out there. I hate it when somebody like this steps up and shows what a terrible one looks like and hurts the reputation of others. So really hope that this family gets justice. The exoneration of somebody is a celebration, which I find odd because they should never have been there in the first place. The fact that you're celebrating him coming home, absolutely worth celebrating, should have never had to happen. And it seems here that one person was largely responsible for that. So I hope he's held accountable. I don't know what kind of sentences the charges against Tran carry, but I think it's just if he is put away, if he's found guilty of these things, he's put away for all the years that he put people away for that shouldn't have been there.
Absolutely. I was thinking in my mind when you were saying that, like, take the longest person, the person who had been in jail the most amount of time before they were exonerated, and that has to be the minimum.
Yep.
But I also think that, the county is going to have to pay all these people that may be, let out of prison. They're going to have to pay civilly for that as well.
Yeah, to all of them, and they do deserve that. And yeah, another wrongful conviction case. Don't want to forget the original victim. Hopefully justice for all will be found here, and we'll keep you updated on that. But this was one of those cases that is fascinating, relatively unknown, and really recent. So I thought it was pretty pertinent to talk about today.
Absolutely, guys. We appreciate you sticking around. Please do a couple of things. Leave us a rating and a review, and go check out Patreon. They keep the lights on over there, and we're releasing some bonus episodes every single month that are only available to those Patreon members.
And if you leave a 5-star review, I'll read it on the air, whether that's over on social media or Apple Podcasts. Apple Podcasts, honestly, even if you don't listen to us there, doing a review there is what gets us the biggest bump in exposure to new audiences. So that's super helpful.
Yep, guys, we appreciate it. Also, if you're interested in CrimeCon, I think it's not too late. Am I right, Jamie?
No,
that
it's
you
not.
can use
Yeah.
a code from us to get you a deal on that.
TCC10. TCC10 will get you 10% off your ticket. I mean, tickets to that event are well worth it, but they're not cheap. So that 10% will hopefully be helpful for you. If you use our code, it looks good on us, so they'll invite us back.
Yep. Guys, we appreciate you. And until next crime, this has been True Crimecast.
You've listened to True Crimecast, distributed by Stoveleg Media. Check out stoveleg.com to find out more about your hosts and to find other podcasts to listen to. Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
The world of Sonic the Hedgehog has been thrust into a not-so-dark, not-so-stormy hard-boiled detective story that probably nobody saw coming. Follow Sonic and the intrepid Chaotix Detective Agency as they take on their biggest case yet. This high-flying, action-packed adventure will take them across the world, fighting for every clue they can find. It's one heck of a tale, which is good, because this story might be the only thing that can save their lives.
Ah, well, if that's all, I can just dispose of you.
Wait, what?
All will be revealed in Sonic the Hedgehog presents the Chaotix Case Files. Listen now, wherever you get your podcasts.
When the